Well, hello everyone. It's Joyce Davis. I'm PennLive's Outreach and Opinion Editor. And this is an editorial board meeting about a topic that I think we all have to agree is most important: election security. Making sure that people who go to the polls to vote in person feel safe, feel like they're not being intimidated, feel like they're not being threatened. And we have with us members of an organization that have dedicated themselves to this issue. It's Pennsylvania Voice, I believe is correct. And we have several members of this organization with us who are going to talk to us about just what they're seeing and frankly, what their concerns are. They asked for this really quickly called meeting of the editorial board because it seems to me they fear that there are real problems that we have to be aware of, that our public has to be aware of. So at this point, I'm going to let people know that we do have members of our editorial board here. Reverend Sandy Stroud's been in Portsline. We may be getting some others to join us. We do have two of our reporters on the line who are going to be listening in, Sue Glider, as well as Sean Adams. And I'm just going to right now at this point turn it over to the representatives of Pennsylvania Voice. And I think Shalaway Ugumefum is here with us. And if I didn't say your name right, my apologies. We're doing best we can. But why don't you take it away, Pennsylvania Voice?
Thank you so much, Joyce, and good morning, everyone. My name is Shalawa Ogunmefin, and I get the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of Pennsylvania Voice. We are a team of 16 amazing leaders who support over 60 nonpartisan organizations working across race, class, and culture to expand civic participation, make voting easier, and secure equitable representation in state government. That includes three of my fellow panelists, the folks joining today: Miracle Jones from One Hood, which is based out in Western Pennsylvania, Steve Paul from One Pennsylvania, who is statewide, based here in Philadelphia, and Diana Robinson, who will be joining us from Make the Road, Pennsylvania as well. But it also includes organizations like Common Cause and ACLU, who do the proactive work to ensure we protect the election before Election Day. They make sure the election happens safely and securely on Election Day. And as we'll hear from many of the folks on the call, coordinate work to make sure that every vote gets counted after Election Day as well. Base building organizations like the folks that you'll hear from on the call, who are actively having conversations with voters year in and year out to engage them in what is important that's happening in their communities in order to get them to really understand the need for civic participation, and work to expand access to that civic participation to make sure that every voter has the opportunity to cast their ballot. And many other organizations across the Commonwealth, including Council on American Islamic Relations, Asian Americans United, or Bhutanese communities associated in Pittsburgh. And what we want to talk about today is election, right? Like we're 5 days away from Election Day, one of the most important and integral elections that we've seen. And we're really, really excited to be on the back end of a campaign that we've been running across the state since October 4th called Vote Today, PA. You'll see my hat, and hopefully you've seen this logo around, because we've been encouraging people across the state not to wait until November 5th, but to actually use the opportunity that's created by vote by mail in Pennsylvania, to head into a satellite election office, complete their vote by mail application, get their ballot, submit their ballot all in one turn so that they can go ahead and cast their ballot before Election Day. And what we've seen across the state is how excited everyone has been to actually have the opportunity to vote early. In Philadelphia County, in Allegheny County, in Montgomery County, partners have been working to ensure every voter has that opportunity. And in the counties where they haven't had satellite election offices open to do the same thing, structured in the same way as those counties, we've seen hour-and-a-half lines in Bucks County, in Chester County. Folks have wanted to vote early before Election Day and haven't had the opportunity to. And so I've just been really excited this year to work with this coalition in order to actually bring an opportunity not to wait until Election Day, but to vote early in Pennsylvania. But we also have the opportunity to actually create early vote in Pennsylvania using legislation. And so so just want to point folks to the amazing opportunity that we have that has been introduced by Speaker McClinton earlier this year, so that we can get actual early vote and actual same-day voter registration right here in Pennsylvania. So what has that looked like, and why are we talking to you all today? I'm going to turn it over to some of our partners who are in the field doing the work to talk much more about what that has looked like. But as an organization that has been working in the field, coordinating with partners and making sure that every single voter has the opportunity to vote in this election, and has been doing so coordinated since 2020, I just want to lift and appreciate county commissioners across the state and the labor of love that they do to ensure our elections continue to be safe and continue to be secure. I want to just highlight all of the state government officials who are doing amazing work to make sure that all of you can cast those ballots. When we head to the polls on election day, the poll workers that we see, those are our neighbors, they're our friends. We know elections in Pennsylvania have been safe and secure, and we're going to continue to ensure that they are. And so I will turn it over first to Diana Robinson with Make the Road to talk a little bit more about the work that they're doing to really make sure every voter has the opportunity to cast that ballot in the means that is the most convenient for them, safely and securely, like always, before Election Day or on Election Day, November 5th.
Shalom, before we turn it over to Diane, I do want to just clarify and make sure, because I know you are, this is a nonpartisan organization or coalition of organizations that are dedicated to making sure that the elections are safe and fair. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the work of Pennsylvania Voice that we do is completely nonpartisan. The work that we coordinate with partners is also nonpartisan. Our work is to make sure that every voter, regardless of who they vote for or what they are voting for, have the opportunity to vote for something. Several of our partner organizations, including the partners on this call, have different organizational structures, but Pennsylvania Voice and the work that we coordinate and the foundation that we build with partners to make sure every voter can cast their ballot, which includes voter registration and C3 friendly nonpartisan GOTV efforts. All of that is done through the lens of every voter should have the opportunity to cast their ballot. Thank you so much for that question, Joyce.
Absolutely. So Diana, let's hear from you with Make the Road PA.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Diana Robinson, Co-Deputy Director at Make the Road Pennsylvania. We're a community organization organizing in Latinx Black communities in Allentown, Reading, Hazleton, and Philadelphia. And as Shala was mentioning, one thing for us that's been really important this year is really getting people to take advantage of being able to vote early by mail, but also bringing joy to that process by having different events that people can do this in community and together. And so we had an event on October 26th in Philadelphia with partners SEBA as well, where we were able to bring majority Latino voters to a satellite election office where they were able to cast their ballot. There was music, there was dancing. We also had some celebrities who were interested in supporting. So it's been a really great opportunity for folks to take advantage of being able to vote or early, cast their ballot. But also what's been really important is being able to do this in Spanish with communities who can then have this information in Spanish, understand the ballot, and have an opportunity to really go over like what's on the ballot, what are the positions that are up for election. That's been a big part of our year-round work to really educate our community members about it. We've also had our own community members texting their friends and family about requesting mail-in ballots, about going to vote early at an elections office or at a satellite election office. And they've been so excited about it. This upcoming Saturday, we have two events that will be happening, one in Reading, Pennsylvania, the other in Allentown. Similarly, people are going to come together to drop off their ballots in community with music, food, and just a joyous event. One thing that's really important for us is also for our youth to be involved and see the importance of voting, seeing the practice of voting, and seeing every year people participating in our democracy.
Very good. All right. Well, and where are you actually located? Make the Road PA. Where are your offices? Did you say Pittsburgh or?
So we're in Philadelphia, Allentown, Reading, and Hazleton.
Oh, okay. A wide area. And as far as you're seeing now, are you seeing greater turnout and greater interest in voting this election than in previous elections?
I would say yes. At our vote early drop-off ballot parties, we've had 100 to 150 people. These two upcoming events, the one in Reading, we're expecting about 300 people to participate. Here, I'm in Allentown currently, so in Lehigh County, we did have people going to the elections office yesterday to vote, to request a mail-in ballot and vote in person. And so we have been seeing people take advantage of this opportunity. Like Shalwa mentioned, we've heard about long lines, we've heard about people wanting to do this. So we're really excited because there's an interest for this, and how can we sustain this and have this be a yearly thing and expand it outside of up to other counties that can have more satellite elections offices. And here in Lehigh County, it was even extended that today people can request their mail-in ballot and vote in person until 5 p.m. So we're really excited about that opportunity as well.
It sounds like you guys are turning voting into a party. That sounds like that's a fun thing to do, right?
I think in Spanish you would say like it's a orgullo, like it's pride and joy to vote.
Right.
And so doing that is so important.
All right. Well, we'll come back to that. But who else do we have, Shalwa? You got to unmute.
I'm so sorry, y'all. You would have thought I figured it out by now. Next up, we are going to hear from Steve Paul, the executive director at One Pennsylvania.
Very good.
It's a constant learning with this Zoom stuff. Yeah. Super excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity. My name is Steve Paul. I'm the executive director of One PA. So One Pennsylvania is a Black-led, multiracial organization. We're a statewide membership-led organization solely focused on building Black political power statewide. We use civic engagement, which is, registering people to vote, turning out to vote, and community organizing to empower our communities and to win the change that we believe. And some of the issues we organize around are housing justice, environmental justice, and worker power. Our approach is year round, being in the community all year, not just during election time. And this is not a strategy for us. We truly believe that's the way to actually impact and make change, is being constantly in community, having conversation with folks, and being deeply connected at the grassroots level. So because of that, we maintain like a consistent presence, engage in the communities several times a year around their issues. And so when the first time you talk to a 1PA canvasser, it's not necessarily about an election or anything, but it's about what's going on in your neighborhood, right? Like, what is there a vacant lot, and how do we come together and solve that problem together and tackle those issues? And it's not just around like affordable housing, but it's also like living condition. For example, in Chester City, we're throwing down with folks who've been impacted by the incinerator, or in Nicetown and West Philly, we're talking to folks about vacant lots. And so this is the first interaction folks have with 1PA, and they start to build those deeper relationship. And then we also work with our members in our community to show them how those changes can be possible if we had the right people in elected office. And so we also do lobbying, grassroots lobbying in both the local municipalities where we work on, at the federal level. We're part of a national organization called the Center for Popular Democracy that we often engage with our brothers and sisters at Make the Road that engage in federal policy changes as well. And so, yeah, and this year, we knew it was going to be a big, important election. 1PA, we do this work in Pittsburgh, we do this work in Delaware County, we do this work in Philadelphia. We have two offices, one in Pittsburgh, one in Philly, but we also talk to Black folks statewide in general. And so this year we made over 3 million phone calls, 2 million text messages, engaging Black voters about the importance of turning out and participating in the election. And because community and organizing is so essential to what we do, we've actually recruited 90 of our members and community leaders into this voter guard, what we call the Guardians of Democracy program, where these are folks at the neighborhood level talking to the 100 people around their neighborhoods about the importance of not just voting this election, but what it could mean potentially for the issues, the real issues that they're facing in their communities, and why it's important to show up, and why it's important to be in deep relationship with our organization, 1PA. We've also registered, in coordination with other partners at the Pennsylvania Votes table, over the last 2 years, almost 40,000 people to vote, and not just register them to vote, but actually get them to commit to vote by mail, get them to commit to showing up to a meeting and actually engaging in community organizing and grassroots level stuff with our organization. We have 200, which is the largest program we've had in a long time, almost 200 folks across the state knocking on doors, talking to their neighbors about the importance of voting. We'll at the end of the election almost knock on almost 700,000 doors. And in coordination with our sisters and brothers that make the road, and as well as One Hood and other working families and other folks at the table, we are also bringing an atmosphere of joy to this election. And we've had, I think now, a couple of, I can't even keep track anymore. We've had a lot of parties at 1PA, had Beanie Siegel, five parties between Pittsburgh and Philly. Basically same thing as Diana said, food trucks, bouncy houses, kids activities, celebrities like Beanie Siegel, Freeway, and other local artists just doing concerts and bringing community together to, like, for joy, but then also going to the early voting sites and getting folks to, like, register and turn in their ballots. So that's been really great. The last thing I say is, like, we've also this year been really focused on, like, incorporating culture into some of the work that we've been doing. So we've worked with battle rappers, we've worked with local rappers to just create unique songs about voting and the importance of voting. The battle rap was super amazing, and folks had deep, rich conversations about why folks either haven't engaged in the electoral process or why it's important to engage in the electoral process. And so, yeah, that's about us.
Okay, I don't think we've heard from Miracle, right? So, come on, Miracle, let's hear from you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miracle Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a director of policy and advocacy of One Hood Media. We are a Pittsburgh-based social justice arts organization. We use arts and cultures to build liberated communities. And like everyone has said, we are building joy and using our arts and our tools and our outreach to reach our community. And part of that is because, as playwright Jeremy O'Hara said, for those who've been radically excluded, they need to be radically included. And when we think about Pennsylvania, there's a legacy of hate and violence and anti-Blackness that really permeated our policies. And we know that for a lot of our community members, they are people who've been impacted by the electoral process and not always necessarily uplifted, right? And so when we're bringing people back in and wanting them to know their vote matters, that their vote counts, we want to make sure we're knocking on doors, we're calling them, we're inviting them in, but we're also going to where they are in ways that they feel safe and comfortable and in a language that they understand. I am someone who moved to Pennsylvania in 2015, right? And I was so confused about the electoral process. Like, what do you mean we have 67 counties and each county is different? The way I vote in Allegheny County is not the way I vote in Chester County. That is confusing. And why we, as people who are privileged to understand that it's confusing, to an average voter, that is disenfranchisement. If you tell me that I can walk, in Philly, and I have 15 satellite, locations, I got 25, drop boxes, but in Pittsburgh, I only have one, people do not understand that. And so for us, we understand that we're not only trying to educate people about the reason why elections are important, but we also have to educate people about the processes. We have to tell them to come to the Board of Elections meetings. We have to tell them what is going on with the Supreme Courts, what is going on with the legislature. It is overwhelming, it's confusing. And like Steve was saying, we and Diana, we're working with working class people who don't have 25 hours to go sit down at a legislative meeting and understand like what has happened, who don't have time to literally follow a bill through the most divided legislature in the country. And so what we try to do is work in collaboration, because we understand that we as an organization cannot talk to every single voter within Pennsylvania. And so what PA Voice has done is bring us all together to the table so that we're able to like share our resources, share our information, and actually work together. We have hosted events with every organization like on this call. And we do that because we understand that there's room for all of us to grow and to thrive. And so we're moving away from this competition and really trying to be in collaboration. We, as One Hood, we're a Black Muslim-led organization. And so that is a very impacted community. And we want to make sure that people understand that they also have the right to vote, that they're not going to be arrested when they come to vote, that they are not going to have someone looking at their religion when they come to vote, that they're not going to be denied because they have a foreign sounding name, that they're able, as like Diana said, to get their ballot in different languages, right? We just had the largest language access win in Pennsylvania a few weeks ago. And that is because of the work of the people like on this call to make sure that everyone is included, especially returning citizens. With One Hood, we do a lot of criminal justice organizing, and that is what started us. We started as an organization to interrupt cycles of crime and violence within our communities. And so with Pennsylvania being one of the few jurisdictions that automatically re-enfranchises people once they're released, we wanted to make sure that that community was also included, and that community was also able to learn how to talk to a legislator, to learn how to share their stories. And so we have people making art. I do wheat paste art with permission, so I'm not over here doing graffiti and breaking the laws. But we hire artists to talk about their community, to talk about the impacts of the law. We do videos, we do performances, we do spoken word. We throw pop-up parties, block parties. We also do like forums in town halls. We do surveys, all the things to let people know that their issues are of a matter of importance, and their issues are needed. And because of that, we've been able to go stronger. And with that, I will turn it back over, I guess, to you, Joyce, or to
Well,
you,
yeah.
Charlotte, for the next parts.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically what you brought up there about the confusion, the complexity of the voting process and the governmental process in Pennsylvania is really important. I remember when I first moved here, I didn't know where to vote. I wanted to be an independent, but if I was an independent, I can't vote anywhere, right? So it truly it takes some getting used to and understanding, and not everybody has the time and ability to really delve into that. So your organizations are doing good work in that. But let's I see we've been joined by Jeffrey Lord. Great to have you here, Jeffrey, a member of our editorial board too. But I guess the question that I really want to talk to you about is that, and I see Reverend Sandy Strauss has her hand up, but before we turn it over to Reverend Strauss, what we really want to know, you've discussed some things where you feel people are being disenfranchised or have been disenfranchised, and you've moved to try to address that. But right now, what is this atmosphere that's here? Is that hurting at all? People's feeling that they can go to the polls, that there's concern over safety. Shalawa?
Yeah, I will say that it's always nice to remind ourselves that democracy is intended for people to participate, right? And we're a Commonwealth state, and the goal is that like what the people want is what we see actually turned into policy and what we are held accountable to. And so we've seen an increased polarization in a lot of different ways since, I would say, the 2016 election, and we've seen the divisiveness that actually creates, and how the people that are the most affected by that in negative ways is the general public. It's each individual voter. I think a great example of that is Act 77, right? So in 2019, Pennsylvania Voice and partners had the incredible opportunity to work with legislators, Republican legislators actually, to introduce and pass Act 77, which got us no excuse vote by mail in the state of Pennsylvania, right before COVID, right? And that was such a monumental decision, because without that, what the elections looked like in 2020 would have been incredibly more difficult. And so it was the first time we had no excuse absentee voting in Pennsylvania, but counties at least knew we were going to have some version of it so that they could prepare, because it's important that counties have the time and opportunity to run elections in the way that are the fairest and most convenient for voters. And so after the 2020 election in 2021, what we saw was that Republican legislators, some of which were the same co-sponsors on that Act 77 legislation, they actually sued the state, saying that that legislation was unconstitutional. The one that they themselves supported us by introducing in the state that gave us the law to begin with, right? And so like that is just a one example of the level of polarization that like we're having in basic things that have to do with democracy in Pennsylvania. And Act 77 wasn't a perfect bill. There have been many opportunities for us to clean it up. Like what Miracle was just talking about, what you just actually lifted up, Joyce, about there's a lot of things in election code that are archaic, right? They aren't for the purpose purpose of voters voting and having their voice understood by county election administrators. They don't help county election administrators make the election more safe or secure because they're already safe and secure. So we could have actually passed legislation that has bipartisan support across the state that would have allowed us for pre-canvassing, so that election offices could have actually started to do the work of count and balance for election day. And we didn't take the opportunity to pass that. We could have passed legislation in Pennsylvania that would have made it so that you don't have to sign an outside envelope and date it after you put your ballot inside of a secrecy envelope and put it inside of the other envelope. Like all of those steps, each one of those steps makes it more difficult to vote. And they don't help county administrators make sure the election is any more safe and secure. And so I think those are just a couple of examples of the polarization and the effects of that on individual voters. Because when we asked Pennsylvanians, and we did ask in 2022, we did a poll in the field and we asked Pennsylvanians what they wanted to see in terms of democracy. And 67% of them said they wanted to see early vote in Pennsylvania. 66% said they wanted to see same-day voter registration. And even a larger percentage said they wanted to make sure that we had language access in Pennsylvania, that you should be able to vote in the language that you feel the most confident in. And we haven't seen those policies pass in Pennsylvania, but we've seen several attempts to make it more difficult to vote instead of those things that voters have called for that make it easier to vote, that county commissioners across the state have supported as well.
Yeah, I have to tell you, in voting, you have to be so careful that you got to put the date here and you got to do this. And it's like, it's so intimidating, even for somebody like me that's used to be, right? And so I can only imagine the average person, what they have to, or if you have someone who has a disability or who's older and really, needs some help, we make it much more difficult. But anyway, Reverend Strauss, let's let you come in.
Yes. There's certainly the issue of intimidation when people go to the polls, but I'm also wondering, well, and first I should say I've already voted because I work the polls, but one of the things that happened last time when I was working the polls, and I'm wondering if it's going to be a trend this time, is I had someone challenge and say their vote didn't count when it went through the machine. And I had to go through the whole process of going to where people checked in, getting the numbers, going to where they picked up their ballot, getting the numbers, and then going to the machines and saying, all three of these numbers correspond. Your vote counted. And I'm just wondering if there's anything, I guess you all are more concerned about getting people registered and out to the polls, but I'm wondering if you can talk about any work that might be going on to stop not just the intimidation that people may face as they try to go in, but also some folks gumming up the works and causing people to then have to back up in lines and then have to leave.
Yeah, and so the work of the folks on the call today, we really wanted to focus on like how we are supporting voters and voting, but our coalition includes amazing organizations like ACLU, who we've seen recently in the news a lot, and a lot of the proactive work that they're doing to ensure that every voter's ballot can actually be counted, and using the system and using litigation in order to be able to make sure that that's so. Organizations like Common Cause Pennsylvania, who recruit poll monitors and folks like yourselves who become experts on election law so that they can make sure in real time that situations like that are easily handled, to support our county administration and our state administration, because they are so under-resourced and so understaffed that their labor of love can always be better resourced. And we have organizations like Public Interest Law Center and just lots of folks that are doing a lot of the work that you're talking about, whether it is before Election Day in doing advocacy to counties across the state to find out what ways can we support you so that when those challenges do happen, that every voter's ballot can be counted. Because for us, this is a holistic approach. We support the voter before election day, we support them on election day, but we have to make sure the process works in the way the process should work. So we need that ballot to be counted. And so many of the folks on this call in 1PA Make the Road, I know you all did this work in 2020. One Hood, I think you all have also done this before, but one of the things that our team does is actually support voters in challenges to their ballots, right? So we've seen challenges after every election day, you know, not just in 2020, we've seen these challenges happen. A lot of the things we're talking about now have become a lot more sensationalized, but we've had these challenges, so we're often prepared to see them happen in real time. And so there's folks on my team, on our voting rights and election administration team, who work with counties to actually get the list of the voters whose ballots are being counted in terms of like provisional ballots, so that we can actually reach out to those voters and make sure they have the opportunity to make it to those hearings. Because again, lifting up Pennsylvania election code, and there's some things in it that are archaic, and I'm really excited to work with partners on a statewide Voting Rights Act that can potentially actually like ease some of these things in Pennsylvania law that could be better. Because right now, if your vote is challenged, there is not a constitutional requirement for that county to even let you know, right? And with not enough resourcing and not enough staff to even do the work that they have to do, like that is not necessarily the first thing that every county is thinking about right after election day. And so many of the folks on this call have done so much work to actually reach out and call voters when their ballots are being challenged, to make sure that they can make it to hearings. So I'll lift any of the folks on this call to tell any of those stories that they have. But I'll say that like that work that you're talking about, our coalition, particularly ACLU, All Voting is Local, Common Cause, Public Interest Law Center, they've been working and advocating with counties to try to get them to do the best version of what they could. And then like working with the legal and court system in order to like incentivize and encourage some counties that maybe weren't doing what it is that like our interpretation of the law says they should be allowing voters to do. And they are very prepared to continue doing that work to support the process post-election day.
And I'll just add, like, I think, oh, go ahead, Miracle.
I'll do real quick. I would just say also, we look at disinformation and misinformation as disenfranchisement, right? And it may not be in other communities, but for us, that's how we look at it. And so we are, like Shala was saying, before election hearing things. And what we are able to do is reach out to the Board of Elections and be like, this is what we've heard, right? So how do people know that their ballots are going to be counted, and what information can you put out? And we also, through some of the partners, reach out to the Secretary of State, and they put out information as well. So if you look at the Secretary of State's website or on their social media, which you will notice changed radically within the last 4 years, of the videos that they put out, of the information we put out. And a part of that was because we started to say, like, we as organizations are putting out this information, but you as the government have to do your part as well and get this process. So now people know that when you vote on Tuesday, we may not know until Friday, right? You know, no one's stealing your votes, no one's switching out the votes, but this is how our process is. In Pennsylvania, our drop sites are manned, like in Allegheny County, right? So nobody can come in and bring like 800 ballots and switch them out. This stuff that we would have maybe 4 or 5 years ago just dismissed as like conjecture or conspiracy, we understand what that means and how that creates violence for our communities. So now we try to, on the front end, combat that with education, with making, you know, little videos, with having influencers, right? I think a lot of times people look down on arts and artists for getting involved within the elections, but a part of that is we are making stuff that's accessible, that's in people's languages, so that they understand. Nobody wants to hear subsection 25, you know, they want to know that they can vote, right? We get very technical in doing this work, but we're also partnering with other people who can talk to their communities in their own voices. And that is why it's like so important, because what that person may have been trying to make the line longer at your polling precinct, or they may have been indoctrinated on YouTube and thought somebody was stealing their vote. And so we don't know until we figure out who these actors are. And so if we're able to tell the Board of Elections something, they're then able to adjust their poll worker training so that you're able to walk people through that process, instead of telling them, Just we don't know. But and then also you'll see starting I think tomorrow, all of our coalitions will be pushing out 866 our vote, right? If you have an issue at the ballot box, if you have any type of problems, you can call 866 our vote and they can figure it out and they can assist you. And these are attorneys, right? Nonpartisan attorneys here to help you. And a part of that is because we know people are fearful, and we're trying to give people the education so they know what to expect at the ballot box, but also the follow up in case there is an issue so that our election workers can continue to do their jobs and make sure our elections are being processed. And I'll turn it over to you, Diana, because I know you said you wanted to add something.
No, you covered it all. All good.
I just wanted to
I
add
will, I
one.
will say she raised some very good points there,
Yeah.
including and we're going to spread that to the 866 our vote, because people really need to know if they have a problem where to turn immediately, right? But the point about the arts and making complex things more understandable and enjoyable. The party voting is a great idea for young people, especially. These are all very valuable things, I think, for the voting process and for government. But let's bring in Vinny here. All right.
Can I just add one comment?
Yeah.
That I will say that I believe that most of the county election boards are honest and are really trying to do a good job. I think that there may be a handful, and I know there's one county that was refusing to allow two people whose ballots were rejected to vote by provisional ballot. I do this in Dauphin County. Dauphin County has been terrific and has really, and in fact, they've said, if there's any question, allow a vote by provisional ballot. Don't reject anybody from at least having that opportunity. So I think most of them are good, but we do have to be cautious about the handful that aren't.
We'll come back to that issue because I also want to talk about the safety of poll workers. But go ahead, Vinny. I want to bring you in.
Well, I was wondering, in your civic engagement and your reaching out, have you partnered with any disability organizations? For example, in Philly, there's Liberty. Here in this area is a Center for Independent Living. There are many issues that affect people with disabilities. And this election, it hasn't been as obvious as it has this election on the issues facing people with disabilities. You have one side who's making fun. You have the other side who's talking about Medicare and home care. So people with disabilities want to vote. They don't always have the opportunity or people reaching out to them to get to the polls. And so I was wondering if you're thinking about partnering, because they're also part of the fabric of the country.
Good points, Vinny.
Thank
How
you
are
for
you guys reaching out or collaborating with organizations that serve people with disabilities?
So as Pennsylvania Voice, one of our allied organizations is Disability Rights PA. And particularly they work with us in our campaign work. And they're some of the supporters that we have for the same day voter registration legislation, the early vote legislation, and the language access legislation. And a big part for them about why, they're allied with us in the fight on those legislations is because of the increased access that would give to people with disabilities in order to be able to vote in the ways that are the most convenient for them and actually allow them full participation inside of our systems. And so I'll highlight that we do, one of our partners that does that work exclusively and specifically is Disability Rights PA. And it's always been a pleasure to work with them in that capacity. We also, many of the partners, and I'll give some space to the folks on this call, have different work that they do that is particularly geared towards supporting folks with disability and being able to participate in the election. And so I'll raise two partners, specifically VEAM, which is based in Western Pennsylvania, who is actually running a Ride to the Polls program, specifically because they want to make sure that they can provide support to folks with disabilities and being able to vote on election day. And so I know they're partnering with folks in Western PA to actually coordinate a network of people who are going to be able to support folks in Western PA in that way. And the second organization that I will lift is Power Interfaith, who also very similarly in Philadelphia County, I believe also Lancaster County is running Souls to the Polls program, where they're supporting individuals and being able to actually get to the polls themselves. And so if there's ever any voter on election day who is having a challenge with getting to the polls, or who would like support, please, that 1-866 Our Vote number, it connects you to the election protection infrastructure that includes the legal groups that I named on the call earlier, ACLU, Common Cause, Lawyers Committee, but also includes many of the folks on this call who are doing that work to ensure voters can actually participate. And so when you're calling that number, you can just call to let us know what your question is, and we can help direct you to where you can get the best resource and answer to your question.
Well, thank you. Can you perhaps put some of that on your website so people who go there see that there's inclusion for people with disabilities?
I cannot guarantee it will be before this Tuesday.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, but I hear you, and we can be more explicit about that. Thank you for the question.
One
Yeah,
of
so-
Vinny's,
Go ahead,
one of
sorry.
Vinny's strengths and she makes sure, because we're so guilty of this, that people with disabilities are at the table and that we hear and that they are included, right? And not a second thought. So thank you for that, Vinny, because we're all guilty of that, of excluding something or other. So your voice is important for us. Go ahead, Miracle.
Yeah, I was also going to say one of the things we've also been doing at the table is trying to include just in the way we engage all over. So you'll notice conversations about you can only turn in your ballot unless you are an authorized agent putting that information out there. You'll see a lot of our websites have been changing, and they're going through to make them more accessible, going through the readers, doing so PA Voice has also shared resources to make like our websites more accessible. You'll see a lot of image descriptions sometimes on like our social media and our captions. So like we're not there, but we are at the table trying to be just like just inherently more accessible, and you'll see that with some of the language that we're advocating for. So even though it may not explicitly say like disability rights or disability justice, some of the framings that we're trying to use of like accessible, polling sites, making sure sidewalks aren't cracked, making sure people aren't there waiting for long lines. We may not say explicitly because people with disabilities may not be able to stand for more than 15 minutes, or people who are pregnant are going to need access to water. But and we can take that, I hear, take that criticism in, but we are also just trying to just inherently understand that our disability community is a part of our community. And so that framing should just automatically be in how we engage and interact as well.
Thank you, guys.
And I'll just add that for us, so we'll have poll monitors in the 5 counties that we are. We'll have people on different shifts, and something that's really important to us is that folks report any issues. So we train our folks to ensure there's an accessible entrance to the polling site. Last year, I myself was called to a site because in Northeast Philadelphia, where the accessible entrance was not open, and we had someone who their first language wasn't English, and they also had mobility issues, and we had to go and ask them to open it. So for us, that's really important, ensuring that we're training folks to keep eye out on everything that's happening at the polling site. And within our own organization, we have various members of our organization that have mobility issues, and we're well aware of it and how important it is. And sharing the information of organizations that are giving rides to polls and things like that is a big part of the work that we're doing to ensure people can participate actively. I'll share a short story. I had this really great experience this past Saturday. Someone got a text message about the event we were having and about being able to vote by mail. I was an older Vietnamese man. He didn't speak English. I don't speak Vietnamese, but we were able to have an interaction through his phone. And he was also deaf. So he was translating on his phone, and we were talking that way. And it really, was important for him to feel heard. And he said, like he was getting all these calls and everything, but he's deaf. And so I think what you raise is really important, what resources are available to people, and ensuring all our communities, because he had mailed in his ballot and he wanted to make sure it was received. And because of technology, we were able to communicate and make that happen. But, you know, ensuring that we have resources for folks and support. And I was just happy that I was there, was able to support. And we have other organizations like AAU and things like that, organizations like that that I was going to connect him to, but he was there in the moment and we were able to have that interaction.
Thank you.
Well, this has been a very thorough conversation, and we're very clear that you guys are on it. Like, you're prepared, you've been prepared, you're looking ahead to this, to the last stretch of the way. But I have to ask you, just with all transparency, how worried are you and about potential violence, about because that's on everybody's mind, right? Are we going to be facing some difficult things? So tell us. I don't know who wants to talk to that. Or how are you prepared? Are you worried? Have you seen any even any racial or other intimidation of voters? Shalwa, do you want to add to that?
I will definitely jump in and then invite other folks to jump in as well. And what I would say is that, like, we have an emphasis right now on a lot of the challenges on elections in Pennsylvania, but a lot of these challenges we've been dealing with since before 2020, since before 2022, and before this year in this election. And so in 2020, I had the pleasure of actually working with the folks on this call to run a program, because we were nervous about what it would look like on election day in Pennsylvania, the first year after a lot of the federal protections were actually like dismantled, that made it so there were laws in place that made us more safe, right? And so what we saw in that year was that the vast majority of the calls we got to 1-866 Our Vote were not about safety, or not about like violence and intimidation. They were about someone not knowing how to cast their ballot, not knowing where their polling location was, right? And the calls that we did get to that number that were about safety, that were about security, they were very often about constables in Pennsylvania. And I'm not sure how much you all have looked into constables, but in Pennsylvania, because they are elected positions, and that means they provide their own uniforms, often what happens is that like their uniforms include guns, right? And so like we saw that in 2020, we saw that in 2022, we saw, an intimidation instance with a constable earlier this year in 2024, where a judge of elections had to have them removed. And we see that on the books, right? And so I think that like it's often systemic things that we're seeing in Pennsylvania that are actually our concerns, and we're prepared to do anything, whether it is the folks on this call, like the partners that are not here, but there's an entire election administration system, as we noted earlier, of incredibly hardworking people who like see it as their job, and it is their job to make sure the election is safe and secure. And we have complete faith in Pennsylvania's safety and security of elections. And so I think that this year we are more prepared than we have ever been in the past. We're more prepared than we were in 2020. We're more prepared than we are in 2022. And a part of the work of the folks on this call is proactively to decrease the chances that we will see those type of incidents. If there's joy at a poll, what are 5 people do with nefarious intentions that are coming to do something differently, right? They can't change how people feel if folks are all on the same page about what's happening. So putting out that good information and reminding folks that like we haven't seen some of the levels of intimidation that we've seen in other states. Like I know there's lots of news articles and lots of salacious like tweets and things on the Shade Room. We have not seen those things in Pennsylvania in that way. We didn't see them in 2020. We didn't see them in 2022. And this year, we're prepared for the things that we know voters need, which is voter education and support, and making sure their ballot is able to be counted. But in the instance of, safety, intimidation, and violence, I think there are many networks across the state that are monitoring, preparing. But the first thing that we can do to make sure that folks are safe is give them good information, make sure that like we have qualified folks at polling locations, and then just make sure that we're doing everything we can do to ensure every single vote is counted.
Very good. That was a little bit of an eye opener for me. I didn't know about the constables. Maybe others do, but that is an area of concern. So thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else anyone else would like to add to this? I think it's been a thorough discussion. Yeah, Jeffrey, go ahead. But unmute. Make sure you unmute.
How's that?
That's fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
just, the image that I still have from 2020 is the counting. And I think this particular image it was on television. I think it was from Philadelphia, but it showed people counting the ballots, and the observers, so-called, were like half a football length away. And I thought, well, what is the point of having them there if you can't have somebody from each party sitting right there to observe? Is that still an issue at all?
Dan, I saw you unmute. Did you want to jump in here?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Oh, no, sorry.
She's trying to see who's Diana. Do you want to answer? I think she's asking.
Yeah, sorry. That was a mistake.
Oh, no, all good. So I will say that 2020 was the first election that Pennsylvania ever had with no excuse vote by mail. And so we passed that legislation, Act 77, in 2019. And so Pennsylvania in 2020 was under the stress of the first time that we had ever had vote by mail. So it was the first time we had ever had that many people apply, the first time that many ballots had been printed, the first time all of those ballots had to be counted, right? We were doing a lot of systems for the first time in 2020. And then we had the additional stressor in Pennsylvania and across the country and world of the pandemic. And so like the conditions that we were facing in 2020 are just not the same conditions that we are facing in 2024. And so
That's
like,
good.
I know that each county has learned so many lessons about how to count ballots the best. We wish and cross our fingers that there could have been, pre-canvassing in Pennsylvania, which would have eliminated what you're talking about or what you're referring to in terms of how long the process takes and the fact that there's that many people sitting in a warehouse waiting for the ballots to be counted because we couldn't do the pre-work of starting to count the ballots before 8 p.m. on election day. And so I have a lot of faith and a lot of confidence in our election workers across the state and in the system that they have to count the ballots. I can't say that I wasn't inside of the room for the particular image that you're talking about today. But I will say that if both parties were equally as far away, to me as somebody who's nonpartisan and focused on making sure each ballot can actually be counted, it feels like the polarizedness or the partisanness of like one party getting more favor than another, it's kind of alleviated if both of them have to be the same distance away.
Yes. And close up. I mean, it was just so obvious to me that they couldn't, they had bicycle racks there, and then they had all these people way beyond. And I thought, no, you'd have to be Superman with X-ray vision to be able to see this.
But Jeffrey, I think when we had the conversation before, they indicated that they were physically apart, but there were cameras that were positioned on this that they could see. So that's how I think that was the answer to that question before. It wasn't that they couldn't see. They weren't physically close, but the cameras were zooming in on them. Yeah. At least that's the way it was explained to me.
Yeah, this is Miracle. And that's one of the things, because the fear is that like if somebody is by this election machine, and we've seen this in other states, is like people were, assaulting the ballot boxes. We don't want anyone to be at the canvassing center and do something with the actual ballots. And so the medium has been, you get to now like C-SPAN, you get to watch people count, and you can like zoom in on like the video, and stuff. And again, that is an accessibility issue, because I guess if you don't have like, internet or Wi-Fi, you can't do that. But that has been like the happy medium. Then people can be like observers on the outskirts. But I do think that you see, you just saw the Secretary of State, I think he was either on CNN or MSNBC, talking about how this election is going to go. And I think you see so many people trying to, on the front end, basically alleviate any reason for violence, like any fear that people have. I think that we're trying to use education as a prescription to inoculate the violence, and that's why you see so much outreach. But again, we're all prepared. We never know what's going to happen. We all have like safety plans. We're all like checking in, and we just hope that we have an uneventful election, and we hope we get back to having uneventful elections. And you'll see that like for our org, we always talk about like on November 6th, we all have to come together and be like, okay, these people are your neighbors, and we're trying to do that messaging, not because it's like, oh, we're all like one people, but it's like, if we start to put in people's minds that these elections should not be so divisive, that these policies should not be so harmful, then we can just get back to like boring elections. Stuff is just like, you go, you vote, and you go
I'm
home.
for that.
So like, you know, that is like the goal of like, we can just try to get through this and like not have like this anxiety, because it's not healthy. Like, it's not healthy for the workers, it's not healthy for the voters, it's not even healthy for the people who are committing the violence to be this frustrated and angry and enraged. So we're hoping that with all of our partnerships and collaborations that PA Voice is leading, that we can really just temper down some of this violence and this rhetoric, and we can just get back to being like humans in a neighborhood, like working for a better future.
Well, amen to that. Hallelujah. Thank you for the good work that you're doing. We all yearn for the day when our elections are once again boring, right?
Yes.
We will see. But anyway, thank you so much. Actually, you're doing your part to make elections enjoyable, full of joy and fun, and something everybody should want to participate in and support each other in. So with that, I thank you guys for taking the time to be with us, and happy voting. If you haven't voted already, get out and vote, and be honorable and respectful to our poll workers. Good luck to you, Reverend Strauss.
Oh,
Joyce.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Is Abe Lincoln still on the ballot?
Goodbye, Jeffrey. See you all later. Bye-bye.